welcome to the Founder Factor, where we interview some of South Carolina's most impactful entrepreneurs. So today we're sitting down with Brandy Amidon. She is the CFO and co-president of Brains on Fire. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, this is fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, such a pleasure. But let's just start with a brief overview of how you got into your current role with Brains on Fire. I know you had worked at the company previously and then transitioned into this leadership role. So just tell me about that.
Yeah, kind of a unique story. So actually, I'm an accountant by trade, which is funny to be like, how in the world did you end up owner of a creative agency? So went to school in accounting, started out in banking, didn't know anything. You take your first job and you're like, oh, thank God somebody hired me.
Right.
Is basically what you're thinking.
Some money.
So I've got a mortgage to pay. Worked there for a few years. Had a friend, actually a boss within the banking industry, who just did not like banking. She's like, I got to get out of here. This isn't where I want to be. Interviewed for Brains on Fire and became their CFO. Okay. And I loved her. And I was like, when you guys get big enough, bring me over. I want to come work at Brains on Fire. Had no idea what we did. I was like, I don't care. I'm just following this person. So started off as a staff accountant. I think I was 23 years old. Such a baby, Caroline.
Yeah.
And just loved it. Loved working with creatives, which is a whole nother, realm to kind of work in.
Especially
banking.
For accountants, in banking.
Yeah. I was usually the adult in the room that was like, is this legal? Is there a liability issue? Can we afford those things? But, working with the creatives, and I loved working with small businesses. So in banking, you got to see one part of the whole. But in a small business, you do all the things. And so that's where I kind of stepped in. Loved not only the money piece, but I kind of developed this skill of working with people, which is a little odd for an accountant because mostly you think of them as heads down doing taxes. But I love the people and culture. And so just kind of evolved out of that space from your typical staff accountant and did more of the businessy things. And then years ago, one of the original founders decided that she was going to retire. And so we had opened up our LA office prior. And Ben Hart, who's one of the owners now, was there, and it was kind of he was going to take over and do the things. And so I'm kind of facilitating that conversation with the two of them. And in the middle of it, I was like, you know what? I would love to be part of this company too. I had worked there a number of years. These are my people. And so I talked to Ben and I was like, you want to go in halvesies and buy out together? And he's like, yes, let's do it together. Cool. And what's really nice is we share the president role, but he's your typical creative. He does the things, the branding, all the really, really smart stuff that we do. That's where his brain space is. And then I get to do the things that I'm good at, which is more on the money and people side of things. Yep. So it's really nice for both of us to kind of have our lanes, but then work really, really well together. So we've both been owners for we're on our 5th year now, which has been great. And just having the trust of your partner, be like, I got you got me.
And the personality fit too.
Yeah. And working together. There's no way I would want to run a company by myself. That, you need somebody to carry you. There's always something. We joke too, there's such a range of highs and lows. In one day it could be we just lost X, Y, and Z client. And then it could be this client or this favorite employee is leaving. But then, it's just constant highs and lows. Yeah. So having that partner to kind of do it together. So definitely have evolved out of that accounting role. We have a person that does all that stuff for us now, but just love the people and the business part of kind of growing this company with an amazing group of really, really smart, creative people.
Sure. And I should probably pause and make sure that we explain what Brains on Fire
does. Oh, yeah, we
skipped
that.
I know, we totally skipped that. So do you call it creative agency, right?
Yeah,
you probably
creative
have a
marketing
better term.
agency.
Creative
Yeah,
marketing
we
agency.
do a lot of branding work. We love go to market, taking something and launching it at a national level. We work with a lot of not-for-profits where they're like, hey, we're struggling telling our story. It's just not what we do from a communication, branding, and messaging standpoint. Help us. And so we do a lot of that work that we really, really love.
Yeah. Well, I know I personally have admired your work from afar for a very long time.
I did it all by myself.
Yeah,
I accountant in the room.
That's so cool though to have a co-president that you feel compliments you and
and you're not stepping on each other's toes. It's always I trust you. We have a really cool way of kind of sharing out, like within Brains on Fire, like alignment tools of like, this is your role, this is where you get autonomy, and just having that kind of trust with your partner is really, really nice.
Sure. How did you feel? Obviously you kind of came up into this leadership role. It's not like you founded the company, set the culture. Like, how did you ensure that leadership cultural fit within the company?
That's a great question. I think what was nice about Ben and I together is that we had been working alongside each other for a long time prior to becoming owners, and even with the former owners too. So there was a lot of trust already established within the existing culture. And so it was almost like, okay, then when we became owners, there was a little bit of a reset because you're almost like a peer for a while. And then it's like, oh, yeah, not necessarily a peer. Now you're an owner of a company. So we did have a lot of conversations about like, how do we evolve this legacy agency? Brains on Fire has been around for over 30 years. And so not only is there a responsibility, like not mess it up. Yeah. We don't want us to be the ones to kind of, do anything crazy, but also like, how do we evolve it and make it long lasting for the next 30 years? And so to kind of answer your question, I think having that trust with the employees up front was really nice to be like, okay, we're going to have change and it's going to be different, but we're going to do it together. And we also want to stay true to the things that have always made us very unique and the things that we hold sacred. So I think that was really nice to kind of step out of the gate versus like bringing somebody in who didn't maybe know the culture and the people, which would have a different probably effect.
Was there any rub operationally, like in terms of kind of taking over with the new leadership structure? Was that
I think what was interesting to Ben and I, like, even though we'd been working together with the whole team for a long time, I think they kind of assumed that day one when we became owners, we would just have this master plan and this is all the things that we're going to do. I mean, there was an assumption like, oh, you're an owner, you know all the things, you got a plan, right? Brandy and Ben were like, actually, we're going to figure out the plan together. We're like, no, like we are stepping up and we have, we have plans and goals, but it's like that was a part where we had to kind of reset with the team and say like, no, we're actually going to do this process together. We kind of did what we do for our clients where we just took the whole team, like an insight conversation. What do we want to keep? What do we want to kind of move from? And so that was interesting where people just assume like just because you sign up for being an owner doesn't mean you all of a sudden have all the answers to every potential problem or scenario. And so that was a little bit of a reset. But then that also gave us this team mentality of like, oh, it's not just Brandy and Ben making decisions by themselves. We're actually going to do this as a team, which I think is helpful when you're trying to grow something or scale.
So what did that look like practically, like doing that as a team?
Yeah, it was a lot of conversations. We did them in small groups and talked about people's fears and what they were most excited about. And then from our standpoint, we had our leadership team where we kind of took that information and said, we all good, this is what we're going to do, and kind of parroted that back to the team. So it laid that foundation work, like we're all on the same page. And then kind of the next year, we started working on goals. So we have goals for everything. And so that was nice too for us to think about what are your individual goals as an employee? What are mine as an owner of the company? What is the design team? What is the strategy team goals? And so just kind of resetting our expectations for each other, but also like, how do we want to grow together? What kind of work do we want to do that we're really, really proud of? I think the purpose conversation for people at work is all over. So like, what is our purpose of being here, and how are we making sure that the time we're spending together is not, it's great to get paid. We all got to get paid, have health insurance, all those fun things, but make sure that we're doing something that we're really proud of.
Especially in the age of remote work. I know you said your team is remote or hybrid, right? Yeah, I've been reading a lot of articles lately on how purpose can be that unifying factor that helps drive that sense of culture even when you're not, all working together in an office.
Yeah, I think we do a lot of, when we interview people, we have more of like a round table. And 9 times out of 10, the person that we're interviewing asks us, like, what is your most favorite part? Or why do you stick around at Brains on Fire? And usually the answer is the people. We love our clients, but we stick around for each other. And that relationship building, you're looking out for me, I'm looking out for you. We want to grow each other. And so that's where it creates that strong. And then the clients get to get the benefits of that because we do great work together. But I think that culture piece is what really keeps people around, whether they're working from remote or live in Colorado or Washington, or if they're in our LA office or Greenville, it just kind of knits us together.
Yeah, like feeling a direction, like you're building towards something.
Yeah, something together.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to share, I'd love to hear about how maybe that transition was for you kind of more personally, like emotionally. I'm sure that's a big bump in pressure and responsibility.
Yeah. I think for me, what made me most nervous is that I don't do the work that we do. And so I had some concerns like, I'm actually not, I do feel like I am a creative because, creatives are in all of us. But I was like, I'm not a designer. I'm not a strategist. I'm not that particular person. So I had some internal fears of like, am I going to be able to do this? And especially from a new business standpoint, you're an owner of a company. You better be able to sell this to people. And so I'm not a natural extrovert. I do it, but it's not like something, some people just have it. And they're like, yes, they naturally just can flow. And so I had some concerns about my ability to do that very well. And when I was speaking to Robin, one of the original founders of Brains, and she's like, Brandy, don't stress over that. Like, you are a dot connector. You're a relationship builder, like build upon those strengths that you have. And once she kind of helped with that, and then also I realized like I am Brains on Fire's biggest fan. I can brag about us. I can, tell people how amazing our team is. And so that gave me a little bit more confidence. My role looked different than maybe Ben's, but also like this is kind of where I can lean into and be successful and not so much stress about the things that would be considered a weakness or just that aren't my areas of expertise.
That's a good way to think about it. Like, how can you build upon your skill sets, your strengths that are already there, as opposed to thinking of it as like, oh my gosh, I have all these new skill sets. I have to all of a sudden figure out how to combine in my personality.
Excuse me. It's like in any review where people like, here's your strengths, here's your weaknesses, this is what you did well, and you automatically go to the things you didn't do well. You're like,
that's so true.
You had like 50 other things, but you focus on that one thing that you didn't do well. And so I think for me, again, it was a little bit of reset. Like, yes, you're actually not going to be able to shine in those areas, and that's okay. You have amazing other people that you work with that can. These are the areas that you're good in, and kind of lean into that. And so a little bit of confidence building in that first.
It affects your hiring, too, and how you think about delegating. Like something I realized in my business is I'm actually not a numbers person at all. Never have been. I've tried to force that muscle over and over again, and finally I was like, you know what? I'm just going to outsource this part. I'll be involved, but I won't be the primary one doing it.
That was actually very smart. Why waste your energy on something that's not going to be beneficial or you're never really going to shine at? And that's okay.
And it depletes you. I think especially leading a business, or even just, not leading a business, working at a business, to make meaningful contributions, I feel like you have to have that well to draw from. And
as a business owner and entrepreneur, I think you also think, well, this is my hole, so I need to hire someone who's really excellent in this space. And so to me, it kind of narrows it down. These are the things that we need and the holes that we need to fill.
Simplifies too.
Yeah.
Right. So how have your priorities as a leader shifted over time? Like if you think about when you kind of first came on in this capacity at Brains on Fire to now, like how is that mindset perhaps different?
Yeah, that's interesting that you asked that. So we have our leadership team, and we, like to talk about things together and how we're evolving as leaders. We used to joke that we were baby leaders when we first started out because we're figuring things out together. So we sort of had a similar question. We're like, how are we evolving, or maybe what did we originally start out thinking was a big priority, but now is less? And for me, it was that I just don't focus on details as much anymore. Especially from an accounting standpoint and money, it's like details matter. But as I've kind of grown a little bit more in the business side of things, I'm more looking at holistic and big picture things. We're trying to grow our company, take us from this level of employees to this level. And so I'm thinking in more of like big picture things. And so I think that's unique for me a little bit to kind of let go of some of that stuff that you could hold on to and maybe move into more of a little bit more strategy for the big picture is really, really interesting.
The high level.
Yeah, which I love. And thinking about how do we look a year or two from now, or how many employees, or what does culture look like versus, debits and credits.
Do you think that's a little bit of letting go of like any perfectionism too?
Yeah, I'm not a big perfectionist. I'm not necessarily that person, but I think it's letting go of some of the control piece to it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So I am definitely
control is in the details.
Control is in the details, and so definitely, again, kind of going back, I have Mary Susan, who is my partner in all things accounting and work related at Brains on Fire. She just has the utmost. I have the utmost trust in her, and so knowing that she's handling all those things and doing them very well gave me the ability to be like, I don't actually need to be in control of those.
Out.
Yeah, I can zoom out and think about other things, which is nice.
Okay. Yep,
you have to be able to let go of things that aren't needed at that particular point in time. I think there's always an evolution, but the letting go piece it wasn't hard, but it was also like, oh, there was a realization, like, I'm actually not doing a lot of accounting stuff anymore. I'm a CPA. I'm like, I don't do tax stuff. Just kind of letting go of some of those maybe notions of like, oh, this is what a typical CFO might do.
It's taking away some of the ego as well.
Yeah.
You don't have to be the one. Other people can do this role.
They can.
Just as well, if not better.
Actually, I was going to say she does it way better than I ever did, which was also like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, right. I don't have to be responsible for this.
You do it.
Always.
You're killing this. You don't need me. Yeah.
Yep. Well, let's take a quick break. You've been listening to the Founder Factor. We'll be right back after this brief pause. This podcast is brought to you by Designly, South Carolina's top-rated app development company, and Word of Web, your partner in smarter website strategy and design. Welcome back to the Founder Factor. We are here with Brandy Amidon, who is the CFO and co-president at Brains on Fire. Okay, well, welcome back.
Thanks.
Let's now switch gears a bit and talk about a time with Brains on Fire that was particularly challenging, a hardship that you had to work through somehow with your team. Does anything come to mind for that?
Yeah, I think COVID was an experience that a lot of business owners went through together. Ben and I had been owners for a year, so we went through that process we were talking about of like taking the team together and this is who we are and this is what we want to do. And then COVID hit. So it felt like
1 year?
1 year after.
Oh my gosh.
And so it felt like a very much a test of, you guys said that you were going to put our people first.
Right.
This is an opportunity for you to live that out loud. And so that was an experience in itself. I still remember Ben. We were like one of the first ones to go remote because we did have a Greenville and LA office and everything was so different in different parts of the country. And I remember we were having a team meeting and Ben was like, we do hard things together. This is going to be a hard thing and we're going to do this together. And then what we felt like was going to be a temporary couple months thing evolved into what everyone knows is a really long-term thing. And so I think that was probably our biggest and first challenge as baby owners together and just taking the whole team, being very transparent and saying, we don't know all the things, but we're going to figure it out together. We're going to keep our people. We're going to make sure that we check in. There was a lot of mental health concerns because then we were all by ourselves and isolated. And so I think we did that really, really well, but it was such a hard test. It was like you said all these things in that first year as you were kind of prepping and, trying to put in place a plan for the evolution of this company. And it's like, okay, now you're going to prove it. And I think we saw the following year of the trust that we built from within the team where they're like, yeah, they are going to make good decisions for us. We're going to pull together as a team. And so that was really good trust, building exercise for everyone together, but also to see us come out of something together and stronger and knowing like, okay, whatever else happens, our industry is volatile. Things happen and just knowing that whatever it's going to be, we're going to be able to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm sure that strengthened that team bond in a lot of ways.
And
also, you went through something.
Yeah,
hard.
And also for Ben and I too, like this was, us learning to trust each other and, going out on faith on a lot of different things and saying like, okay, it's going to work out.
Yeah.
There's a plan B, C, D for every scenario too. And so, there was definitely trust building for us as well. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there were, you thought a lot about like mental health with your employees, with yourselves, I'm sure. What did that look like in practice? I think like we all know that that's a big topic right now.
I read
as it should be, but like how do you actually implement it?
I read every article about mental health, culture, how do you build a great workplace, just anything that pops up. I love to read those things. And unfortunately, there's not like this magic bullet of something.
There's no handbook.
There's no handbook. And everybody's kind of doing the things. And a lot of it is very personal one-to-one. So it's not like, oh, we have this big company XYZ that solves all our problems. It's a lot of like, hey, Caroline, you good? Do you need anything? Oh, your kids are sick. We're going to send you a care package. Here's dinner. Don't worry about this. Oh, you have a grandmother that you need to take care of. We're going to make sure that one of our other designers pulls over some work for you. So there's a lot of like just being seen, looking out for each other, and then also pivoting and trying to help them. There's a lot of the small things of like making sure you acknowledge birthdays and anniversaries. We do a lot of shout outs where like this was really great work because in our industry it's so fast paced. You move from one thing to the other. It's like, oh, you finished a project. damn, that was great work. Now you got to move on to the next one. And so being very intentional about pausing and saying, whoa, let's think, we just did something really amazing together. Look what we put out in the world, or look at the results. And so a little bit more intentional about how we make sure we say, you guys did amazing work together. And just being in that moment, I wish there was something that was like this magical powder or some like app that you buy that, addresses all those things. But it's a little bit more intensive and just constantly looking out after each other, and a lot of just, hey, you good? Do you need anything? I think we've established a really good communication where it's like, you need to step out for your therapist appointment, do it. We tell everybody that. There's a very nice way of saying, like, our mental health is very important and you need to take time for that as well. But then just having the rest of the team back you up if something happens, or there's an episode, or family, or if it's yourself, even if it's your pet that passes away. I mean, like, there's these things in life that happens that you want to be able to do together and not feel like you're letting your whole team down because you just have to step back from something.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good approach, I think, to look at it more one-on-one. I know a big topic for a lot of business leaders in COVID was also, like, how do you ensure these healthy habits without totally overstepping? Work is work. It is not life. It is in one bucket, but it is a big bucket. It does impact your well-being. So how do you,
And we also, I think, do a good job of saying, like, Brains on Fire should not be the most important part of our lives. It's not the most important part for myself or Ben, my partner. Our families are really why we do the things that we do. We want to spend time with them. We work because we enjoy it and we need to pay our mortgage and those type things. But it's really our people that are most important. So I think the fact that you have Ben and I saying that from a leadership standpoint.
Modeling it,
Modeling, you have to. I remember years ago going to Greenville Chamber. It was diversity inclusion. They would have their conferences, and it was all about leadership one year. And it's like, it starts at the top. So whatever you want your employees to model, it has to start with your owners and your leadership team. And so I think with Ben and I modeling that, I do car line every day. There's a period of time that's blocked out. Nobody, I mean, it's like, that's my time. Maybe I pick up my daughter and she's in a good mood or not. But like, people know that, there's Brandy's time. She's not going to let me down on other things. But just knowing, like, my daughter's a priority during that time to make sure she's had a good day and feed her and make sure she's happy. And so there's a lot of that kind of living out. We're not the most important thing. Work is not the most important thing.
And leaders aren't infallible. I think I struggle with this with my business sometimes because I want to project as, like, strong and having everything figured out. Trying to break that a bit. But a big turning point I felt in my business was opening up to my project manager, who's basically like, I don't know how I could run a business without her, but just saying, like, hey, I'm just having a really tough day. Like, I just need to take a step back for a little bit. And, then I think I have found that ever since that, like, kind of our relationship has been stronger and our working relationship has felt more productive too. I mean, it really does.
It's funny that you mentioned that.
It can transform those relationships.
You always work within a close group of people, but at Brains, the ones that I work with the most, we have a lot of conversations about what stresses you out and what are triggers for you, and just a lot of, like, personal one-to-one. What do you need to be successful at work? Which feels like such a big cliche question, but it is really, really important. And so when you mentioned that, Mary Susan, who I work with so much, she knows when I'm stressed because we have identified what does Brandy do when she's stressed. So, like, one example is sometimes it's hard for me to hear details because I'm thinking of 50 different things or, like, big pictures. And so she knows that if she has to repeat details to me
That's
like
so
twice,
funny.
she's like, okay, I can tell that you're a little stressed, and or, like, slow it down or be intentional about when we have conversations. So just to have that trust with like your project manager or my Mary Susan and be like, she knows me and I know her as well.
And it goes both ways.
Both ways. Like, we're looking out for each other. And it's not intentional. It's not like I'm trying to just, blow through and not pay attention. It's like, oh, there are some other external factors. And I think that's really helpful from the mental health. The whole team at Brains feels that way. And we're so connected to each other that we can tell whether it's business related or personal life. It's like, oh, Caroline needs a minute.
And it sometimes takes an outside person to even let you know yourself.
Yeah. I actually didn't know when I was stressed because I feel like I live in a layer of stress all the time. It's like, I don't know if I would know.
My tail is twirling my hair. That always happens. I'm like, someone always points it out.
I'm trying to do better about it, but
Yeah, it's tough.
It is. Because you, like you were saying, like, you are that person. If you're falling apart, the rest of the team, you don't want to be like, I need you guys to keep it together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that is always hard for entrepreneurs and people in leadership positions. Like, how much vulnerability do you share in that? Like, is it just enough to be like, oh, I actually am a real person. I don't know all the answers to this. I'm trying my best. But then you also need to give them the air of like, we're going to make a plan for this together. We're going to figure out, we're going to get through whatever it is.
Like sometimes it's just a matter of having a rough draft and the humility to edit it as you go along.
Yeah. And asking people, I think I might know where to go, but you guys are smart. You might have other opinions or thoughts. We had a really good exercise. We were trying to encourage people to do this thing at Brains, and it's like timesheets. Nobody wants to do timesheets, but it also is good data. And so we had a couple different options on what we thought would be solutions to encouraging the employees. But we brought our leadership team together. We just had a really great, and we made such a better idea than if one or two people would have led with it. So I think, again, in one of those situations where it's like, I think we're going to go this way, but what do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, crowdsourcing a little bit.
Yeah, with people that know and have a really good handle on the rest of the team.
Yeah, that's so great. I feel like you guys have a very inclusive work environment in terms of like just making sure everyone's voice is heard.
Yeah, we try really
hard.
And
it sounds like you have a lot of processes for doing that
too.
It's not just like a value.
Yeah, I think people just assume that creative agencies are just, people sitting in a room coming up with beautiful ideas. And that
they get a bad rep for sure.
Yeah, they really, really do. And I think there is a layer to that because creativity comes from so many different places. But we have a lot of processes put into place. And especially as we're growing as a company, it's different planning for 5 people and 40 from an employee or business owner standpoint. So there are a lot of processes. And there's also flexibility and adaptability. Like, we might veer off in this direction, but these are the things that we know to be true. You trust the process. It's a cliche as well, but it's also a very valid one because you do have a process for a reason. And you also have the trust of this team. It's like, okay, if we're going to veer this way, we can do this and then, figure it out and pivot together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well said. Well, before we end on our favorite last question, is there anything else you want to tell us about?
No, this is great. I think this is just really nice as a business owner. We just go so much. So to sit and reflect and think about some of these learning lessons and even listening to the other podcasts and kind of gleaming from other people who've been through similar situations, this is just very great. A nice therapeutic conversation.
It's funny. We actually had someone cancel last minute a few sessions ago, and as such, our option was that I was the one interviewed, and it was funny. We started talking. I was like, "Dang, this has really been an adventure," and it kind of made me emotional, like talking about
because we just don't pause. We're just doing the things so quickly.
Yeah, and
there's no reflection.
Yeah, and it's fun to as we do these interviews, you notice key themes coming up, and just hearing people have the same like reflections as you, and it is comforting. And sometimes you learn something new or just some new framework to approach issues with. So, all right. Well, last question here.
Yeah.
So, what in your mind is the founder factor? Like that thing, that personality trait, that skill, whatever that makes for a successful entrepreneur or like a well-adjusted entrepreneur. I don't even want to say like successful in terms of making a lot of money.
Yeah, well, successful too. We all make mistakes. And I don't know, when you ask me that question, I think about risk. So as an entrepreneur or business owner, I think you accept a certain level of risk. Some people, maybe they have a good idea, but they never go for it because they're scared or resources or whatever. And so when I think of successful, non-successful, just people that are willing to raise their hand and say, I'm actually going to step into this. I don't particularly like the term fearless leader that some people have a title because I'm like, there is so much fear
I've
involved.
Not met one. And if I do meet someone fearless, I'm like, you are lying.
I was like, you are full of crap because, and I think you have all these fears, but you do it anyway. And so I'm like, you can call me a fearless leader, but there is a lot of fear. But it's like, even though you're scared of something, you still take a chance and a risk. The risk that it's going to fall apart, that it's not going to work, that you're going to disappoint someone, that you're going to make a mistake. So I think the separation that is probably less to do with success is just like being able to raise your hand and step into a role that maybe you've never done before, or risk reputation or ego. Like, what if this fails?
Yeah, how does it look?
Yeah, what if Ben and I come into Brains on Fire and ruin this company that's 30 years? Like, that is a real risk that you live with. But I think that's what separates those who are kind of more of the followers versus the leaders. Like, yeah, we're going to take a risk. Hopefully, it's calculated and smart, and you've got an amazing team of people to back you up. But we're going to do something that's a little different than the norm. And I think that just gives you the opportunity to hopefully be wildly successful.
Yep, that is the tough part about what we all do. Go into the fear.
Yeah, you do. You're like walking into it, hopefully eyes wide open, like some of the things. Yeah. And, you try to prepare for it, but you also don't kind of sit on the sidelines.
Right. And fear sometimes tells you where you need to go.
Yeah.
Out of my experience. Like if you're, I find at least for myself, like if I feel just kind of like apathetic about something, that's usually not the right direction. Whereas if I feel fear, that's what I care about enough to feel fear about.
I think it challenges you a little bit too. One of my fears, because I had helped run Brains on Fire for years prior to becoming an owner, and I think one of my fears is I don't want to be responsible for this whole group of people. There is that, like, what if I let them down and they have families, and you want to make sure you do good decisions. And then when I kind of flipped the script on that, I was like, no, this is an opportunity for me to help lead them, take care of them, make good decisions for us as a whole. And so, but again, there's fear that whole time, but there is that risk of like, no, this could be something really awesome to step into. And I'm going to be scared and fearful, but I'm also going to do it with the team and Ben and everyone's help together.
Yep. Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, that was a great question. I like it.
Good. Well, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. This was great.
Yeah, hopefully, we'll see you on the podcast another time.
I'd love to come back.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for tuning in today to the Founder Factor. Feel free to follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your content. See you next time.